Good evening, Gordon Jenkins.
Good evening, Bill.
And it's nice to be talking to somebody who has made not a great many albums as an arranger-conductor with Frank Sinatra, but certainly some of the finest ones that he's made, including, in my mind, particularly the September of My Years.
Yes, that was a good one. Up until that point, Frank had been quoted publicly as saying that his favorite record in an album up to that time was Lonely Town, which I had done with him, which I was pleased, that he liked it so well, because I certainly did. And then after September of My Years, I don't hear anymore whether he had changed favorites or not.
Well, that would certainly be my favorite Sinatra album, just speaking as one person. I remember the TV special that was made around the recording of September of My Years, a very touching program.
That was the first TV show that Frank did of this series for Anheuser-Busch. I remember that Nelsonville did the rhythm stuff, and I did the pretty stuff.
That seems to be characteristic. Most of your arrangements with Frank, in fact, all that I know of are slow-tempo things, ballads.
Yeah, well, most singers, including Frank, although you can very seldom categorize him as with other people, they figure certain horses for certain races. A fellow will think he wants a comical sound, he'll think of Billy Mayer, and he wants a rhythmic sound, he'll think of Nelsonville, and he wants a certain mood or dark, lonely sound, he'll think of me. In spite of the fact that all of us can probably go in the other directions, we're not in that box, and nobody cares, Doesn't really make
Yeah, you're all versatile, as I remember the fact that you weren't available to do the album Only the Lonely, and Nelson Riddle did that and managed to turn out a very good mood job, which wasn't expected of him, I suppose.
Well, that's it. You see, they don't think the people... I remember years ago in New York when I was starting out, I worked for a lot of different people. I worked for Castellanos, and he thought I could only do jazz, and Rubinoff thought I could only do novelty stuff, and then Lenny Hayden thought I could only do pretty songs, and another guy thought I could only do waltzes, so I didn't ever say anything to any of them. I didn't care. I just...
You were getting a variety that way.
I was getting a lot of work, and I never tipped anybody off. I said, yeah, that's it. You got me pegged right, and I just send the stuff in. But Frank, of course, is a lot smarter than that. He knows that I give him a certain kind of a lonely feel, which befits Frank, being he's the loneliest man in the world. That fits some of his, when he gets in that mood, he wants me to do the background.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Do you feel he really is the loneliest man in the world?
I think he is. He's the loneliest one I've ever run into. I would be maybe a close second to him, but he'll do if somebody comes along. I can't think of anybody. I think that's why he does those kind of songs so well, because he believes the words. He can take some lyric that isn't even too good and put himself into it. It's amazing how he does it, and you watch him do it, and you think, my God, he believes this. He believes this exactly what he's saying. That's why he's the star that he is. I think, these are just opinions. I think most of the big stars are lonesome. I never knew. I've been fortunate. I've been around for 700 years, and I worked with Al Jolson and Judy Garland and Danny Kaye and a lot of the good percentage of the big stars of my time, and I never knew one that wasn't lonesome.
Don't you think maybe it's when a person gets up to a certain point, he really can't tell who his friends are from the people who are trying to use him?
Well, I think Frank, in particular, Frank has high standards, and he has high standards in everything. He doesn't ask you what you charge. If a pipe breaks in Frank's house, he gets the plumber to come in. And what the plumber charges him is of no interest, but he wants the pipe fixed. He wants it fixed immediately, and he wants to fix a nice job with no mess. And what the guy gives him the bill, he doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels the same way about people. He wants people, he expects perfection from everybody. And everybody that works for him, or when he goes to dinner, he wants you to behave. These are just theories of mine. I haven't associated that much personally with Frank, but I've thought about a lot about him through the years, and I think that he is so when he has trouble, when you hear of a little friction in his life, or he may get in an argument with somebody, it's because they didn't meet his standards. He has very, very high standards. He doesn't he doesn't dig second rate. And he hires people. You pay him. He doesn't ever question how much you want to do it, but he wants you to be there. He wants you to do it right the first time, not the second time. And that's it. And if you do that, everything is fine and smiles, and you have a drink, and everybody's happy. But if you don't do it, he gets terribly depressed, and that's when he gets into the little frictions that have marked his life. These are just my opinions. I have, like everybody you like, you have opinions about it.
Oh, that's sure. And I would think that in these days of relative incompetence, which is sort of an agreeable standard among most people, that would cause a lot of problems in his life.
Because in the music business, in the recording business today, everybody looks at the list. They see what's in the top 40, and they say, gee, that's great. Well, the fact that the leading tune in the top 40 might be the worst piece of junk in the last 30 years doesn't bother them any. But it would, under normal conditions, it would bother Frank to death, because he wants songwriters to be good, too. He wants everybody to be Cole Porter. He doesn't see any reason why, if you're going to write a song, why you don't write the best song.
Mm-hmm.
He really does. As I say, I've never been personally close to him. I made it a point when I worked with him to not go out with him and not socialize with him, because we got along so well professionally. I thought, let's leave it there and not fool around on the outside. But he wants everybody to play good all the time, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
How would you describe a Sinatra recording session, since that's mostly what you've dealt with?
Well, I can only describe mine. I've never been to anybody else's. He's the first one we did. We had a big turnout because he had a reputation of eating orchestra leaders alive, and I had a modest reputation of going home if I wasn't happy with things. So everybody that knew both of us came down to the date to watch the fight start. But it was very disappointing for them, and because neither one of us were looking for trouble and never have. And I watched him and followed him, and he liked the arrangements, and I liked the way it was going, and there was not a bit of trouble. We finished early, and he took my wife and I to dinner, and it was just such a perfect evening. We got out of the restaurant, and Beverly says, I just don't believe those stories I heard about Frank being mean to people. It's just impossible for a man with that kind of a disposition, because there's no charm in the world like Sinatra. Nobody even come close to him when he's right, when he feels good. But when people disappoint him and let him down, then he gets unhappy. But the sessions, Frank has great taste, and some of us care still about taste. We don't care about so much about the top 40 or about, we're not thrilled with Tiny Tim, and we're not thrilled with some of the crummy things that are around. We still like to have things nice, and a good song, and a good rendition of a good song, and that he has. His taste is absolutely infallible, and if he comes up to me and says, I want the third bar changed, I'll change it, unless I have some violent reason to not change it. I wouldn't think of not changing it, because he figures to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Any more than I would argue with Henry Aaron how to put my hands on a baseball bat. Why wouldn't he be right? You got to go with the people who have been right through the years. And Frank's taste is so strong, and strong's not the word. It's so right all the time that it would be silly unless I thought that he had possibly missed some point that I had in there, which is with his ear is very unlikely.
That hasn't come up, I take it.
No, we had one. I don't know whether I can get this over in an interview, but in the arrangement of Very Good Year, there's a line in there. He said, when I was 35, he talks about getting older, and I knew that he was going to get some fun out of that. I just knew it well enough to know that he'd get some fun. So I wrote a little background, what we call in the Mickey Mouse background, a little cutesy, dissonant figure, figuring that he was going to get some fun out of it, and this would be funny. And after I wrote it, I started to worry about it. I didn't think it might fit exactly. And then I called my wife in, Beverly, who's a professional musician and has taste right along with Frank's. And I said, what do you think? And she said, well, I don't know whether it's right or not. She said, why don't you wait and see what Frank says? So we came down to rehearsal and we played the arrangement. We got to the spool part, and I looked over at him and he laughed. But when we got to make the first take, he turned around and he said, "Take that thing out." He didn't even say what, but I knew what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want the Mickey Mouse in, and he was right. And I was in doubt, and Beverly was in doubt, but I thought, well, I'll just wait and see. But the point is, people getting along together, he didn't have to say, "Take the thing in the bar 8 out." He knew that I knew what he was talking about.
That's right.
And I just turned around to the woodwinds. I said, "Take so-and-so," you know. And that was the end of it, because he was right. It shouldn't have been in there. But he's done that a lot of times. The introduction to Lonely Town, which sets it up so nicely, I think, was his idea. He almost dictated musically to me how the thing should go. And then I went and wrote down how he was trying to get it through, you know. So if he comes up to you and says, "I don't think that so-and-so has the right feel," you'd be stupid not to listen to him. Because he's right too many times. I wouldn't think of not listening to him.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we differ as to whether he should make another take or not. He has a certain amount of impatience of doing it over, you know. But also, some nights when I thought he should have done it over, he said no, and he'd go home, and then he'd play the record, and he'd come back the next date and do it over. You know, he'd realize that he should have done it again.
Which was the tune on, there was a tune on September of My Years that was done with, wasn't there?
Mm-hmm. It was my song. It was How Old Am I?
Oh, yeah.
He took it home, and he didn't, at the date, I didn't think he did it as well as he should have, or could have, rather. And but I didn't say anything. It was my song. You know, you have to be careful with Frank, because it's not a good idea to rock the boat too much. It's not a question of offending him. I never cared whether I offended him or not. But like anything, the less you say, really, you don't get hurt too often keeping your mouth shut. Unless it's real bad, you figure that he, with his standards, will hear it and fix it, you know. Well, he didn't. It wasn't top drawer Sinatra, so I didn't say anything, and he took the record home and played it, and then he came back and did it over, and we transposed it down. He wanted it a little lower, so we put it down a half tone. He made the whole record over, and it turned out great, without anybody saying anything to him.
So you more or less depend on him simply listening to whatever takes you feel are weak, and he usually turns up having the same opinion.
Oh, yeah. He knows when he doesn't delude himself at all. I think he'd be happier if he would. His standards are just as high for himself as they are for other people. I can't say he likes to work hard. He'd like to do one take on everything, go home, or go wherever he's going. He's not a guy that likes to sit in and pick at it.
But his standards won't let him do it that way.
But later on, he'll hear it back. The only drop in standards I've ever seen with Frank has been when outsiders from the record company who are only interested in making money have talked him into making crummy songs and certain kind of commercial rock and roll songs that he should never have anything to do with, so that they can make money and look good. But that's all done with a purpose, and that it doesn't really count as a lowering of the Sinatra standard. But he wants everybody to do everything right, and why not? Why should you be mediocre?
He prepares himself rather thoroughly before a record session, doesn't he?
I wouldn't say so, no. No, I would say more or less unthoroughly. On the September of My Years album, we never had one rehearsal, one meeting. I never had one meeting with him. But I tried to. I was in Vegas at the time, and I made 5 consecutive appointments with him at 5 in the afternoon, but he wasn't up. You know, he was a pretty good life up there. So finally, he sent me the keys that he wanted to sing them in over the phone. And I went ahead and made the arrangement. But you see, we'd done it before, and I knew how he wanted them to go. And he knew that I did, and he was concerned about it too much. Getting him to sit down and work with you ahead of time on it is, I never have been able to do it. He'll run them down once, maybe. But he's more apt to say, I want to do this song in this key, and tell Gordon to have it there on Thursday. It's a matter of confidence in the people, you know.
Well, he simply apparently has no worries about how it's going to turn out with you.
Well, that's the way it's worked with me. I have no way of knowing how he's done with other people, but no, evidently not. And I don't have any. I know what he's going to do with the song. And like in September of My Years, he sent a message to me. He says to do 2 verses.
On September song?
Yeah, and I know on the song, not September, it's in the album, the September song.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's dumb, but then I thought, well, he's got a reason. You know, he doesn't do dumb things, and it turned out to be a wonderful idea.
Well, it turns out also he's recorded the song 3 times. On Columbia, he used no verse. On Capitol, he used 1 verse. And on the September of My Years album, he used 2 verses. And until you hear the 3 together, you really have no idea how much better the 3rd version is.
Yeah, well, see, that album was a perfect thing. He caught both of us right at the time of our lives where we could do that album. We weren't kids anymore, and neither one of us could have made that when he was 30 and I was 33. That album would have been a bomb. Because to do those kind of songs, you have to be that old. You can't do those kind of songs when you're young, the way he did them, and the way I did it. That was a perfect, to me, I'm not modest about my own work, a perfect mating of song and singer and orchestra. That was great.
I'll agree with you. How large an orchestra do you customarily use in those sessions?
Well, I think those are about 33 or 34. He doesn't care. He wouldn't care if he came in with 100. Because money has no significance, Frank. If I said I need 80 mandolins to play this tune, he'd say fine. I wouldn't even ask him. He would put the bill without any question if I brought in 80 mandolins. He wouldn't care.
That's not something you have to consult with him.
I wouldn't even think of it.
The point I wanted to make...
Never come up.
Yeah, the reason I asked about the size of the orchestra is that I've noticed going through many of your recordings that you get a really true symphonic sound out of what I'm sure are a much smaller group of musicians than a symphony orchestra.
Yeah, but see, you got Sonny Burke in there at in the control room, and experts who are all of us have been around for so long. We know how to make a bigger sound out of fewer men. And I've still got maybe 16 violins and 4 French horns, and you can...
Oh, you use that many horns? Yeah.
Well, on some things I do, depending on the album, depending what nature is. On Where Are You, I think I had 4 horns, or 3 horns anyway.
I think that you must have had early in your life considerable exposure to symphonic music.
Yeah, I did. I grew up in St. Louis, and they had a good symphony there, as small town symphony goes. And my mother had season tickets, and certainly. And I started out as a Dixieland jazz piano player, but as you get older, you try to get into everything you can, and we have season tickets now to the music center here, and I've always enjoyed, try to take everything I can, but it's useful in these kind of things. Working with Sinatra, your personal background is what gets you to it. You've been to a lot of saloons and a lot of love affairs and a lot of trouble, and you're going to get along with Frank pretty good musically because you put down what he wants you to put down.
I've noticed in the, it was a very good year, certain woodwind patterns that remind me very much of the first song in Mahler's Wanderer cycle, you know?
Yeah, well, I don't know. No, he's not one of my cats.
Mahler is not?
Well, no, I have nothing against him, but he's not one of the ones that I grew up with that I've copied so extensively. He's not like Sibelius or Tchaikovsky or Rachmaninoff or Wagner. Most of the pop guys go along with... I never have been exposed to that much Mahler. If I did copy in there, it was accidental.
Well, I don't mean copy. I just mean a flavoring,
when
you know?
When you say copy, it's just to your... I did an album of Jewish folk songs, and one of the critics very rightly said it had a heavy Sibelius influence in the orchestration, and it did because I have been heavily influenced by Sibelius, years. And you fall into the forms of what you've heard so many times.
I detect a lot of Brahms in your work, too.
Well, that's also accidental.
Maybe one doesn't really know who he's influenced by sometimes.
Possibly, very possibly. I heard it all, and I try to hear it all, and you can't tell. It's more a question of style. The things that you hear early are very strong influences. I think
Well, they become subconscious
I hear
after a
some
while.
of the early Tchaikovsky stuff that I heard in St. Louis when I was growing up, and it's kind of embarrassing. I've stolen so much of it. You know, it's just, I didn't mean to, but I just heard it, and I fell into that thing, and the early things that most jazz musicians of that era got into, like Afternoon of the Faun and the Planets and the Tchaikovsky Fourth and Fifth Symphonies, and the easy stuff to listen to. You didn't have to be what we used to call long hair, which doesn't apply anymore, but you didn't have to be deeply into it to understand those kind of things. You know?
Right, yeah.
And the Firebird and stuff, we used to sit around with the colored lights and the marijuana and listen to those things, and we figured we were very advanced and very...
Now they're doing the same things again, huh?
Yeah, it's all come around. It's not changed very much.
As I recall, at one time you had two theme songs in dance bands at the same time, didn't you?
Well, I had Benny Goodman's theme song, Goodbye.
And Woody Herman's opening theme song, Blue Prelude, right?
Yeah, that's right, I did.
You had two of them working at the same time.
Yeah, well, Joe Bishop wrote Blue Prelude. I wrote the lyric to it, and he was with Woody at the time when he first started out. And then I worked with Benny. I was Benny's first, one of his first arrangers when he got his band together. He thought I was a jazz arranger.
Everybody wanted to categorize you.
They still do. Everybody thinks that only certain people can only do certain kind of things. You know?
Well, it's like typecasting with actors, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
And which molds are what people putting you into at the present day? In other words, what do you have happening at the moment?
Well, I'm getting a television show together, and I got a call from Frank to do a... Well, he says get ready to do one. I don't know what it is.
A television show?
No, an album.
Ah, good.
And then I'm doing a Christmas premium album for a private company, and I'm much busier than I like to be, but they're good things I like to do, so I don't like to work too often. I don't have that many ideas.
You seem to me to have enough ideas for any half dozen of the run-of-the-mill.
Well, I've got a lot of them, but I don't believe in using them up too fast. If I do an album with Frank, I like to lay off for 2 or 3 months before I do another one. I'll have to let it pile up again. One reason that the September of My Years album came out as well as it did, I hadn't written a note for about 4 months. On purpose.
Everything is fresh in that album.
So I was ready to go. You know, it's not like some guys, contemporaries of mine, believe in taking every job that is offered to them and working hard and piling up their income tax. And you run out of ideas. The well is not that deep. You don't have that many. Nobody.
Yeah, most of these guys are young guys. They don't know that yet.
Well, true. And they burn themselves out trying to be famous and rich, and they don't realize that you cannot keep writing and writing and writing just because people will pay you a lot of money to do it. You just don't have that many ideas. Nobody does.
Now, tomorrow night, or tonight as it happens at the time this tape will be heard, you have a son who's involved in the Battle of Bands at the Hollywood Bowl.
Gordon Jenkins, Jr. is the production supervisor at the Music Center and the Hollywood Bowl, and his wife produces the Battle of Bands show, and he generally makes a couple of arrangements, and it's really very good. Great kids, great talented kids come out. And I'll be out there and listening and applauding and cheering.
Well, very good.
It's a nice thing. There's always some outstanding kid in there.
Okay, well, I think it's about time for me to end this tape, because in the first place, the reel is about full. So
I talk you to death. You asked me to talk, and I'll talk you out of this.
Oh, it was beautiful. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Bill.
Hang on, I'll talk to you after the thing's over.